Okay, so we're talking politics. It starts on Monday morning. I'm sure you have been following the dailies and what they have to say about, what has been going on in the polity. There was a town hall yesterday, and a lot of the dailies followed that. In fact, New Telegraph says name calling takes the shine off presidential campaigns. For a number of people, yes, a lot of people want the politicians to focus on the issues for 2023. And a lot of that doesn't focus on, on sentiment, more or less. But can we really do politics without sentiment? Is it really possible? Because some people say politics is an emotional venture and that people oftentimes vote emotionally. Recently, there was a statement attributed to Senator Dino Melaye who said that there is no way that the Labour Party candidate can win because he's a regional candidate. Well, the Labour Party has swiftly countered that. But for those who are watching the polity, whether or not they'll vote, the number of analysts are saying these elections are most likely going to be regional. Is it possible that we'll be able to avoid that? Well, I have two gentlemen here with me this morning. Mr. Elemona Onoja is a member of the People's Democratic Party. It's good to see you. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Malpa.
And we also have with us Mr. Chris Wonkobia Jr., who is a member of the Obi Dati Presidential Campaign Council. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily once again.
The pleasure is profoundly mine.
Yeah, so we have been talking. Only on Friday I had a discussion with the DG of your Presidential Campaign Council. He was very matter-of-factly in the conversation that I had with him. I do not know if you were able to see.
I saw it.
You saw it, okay. And a number of things came up. I was telling him about, because part of the controversy which we discussed was the controversy around the endorsement or otherwise of the party, the candidate of your party by Afenifere, a Yoruba social political organization. And it just turns out that there was another endorsement, or will I say, well, let's just call it endorsement for the sake of, can't find other words now. And that has created some controversy. Now, we saw what happened with Afenifere. I asked him for a response to that, and he, said that he doesn't think that Yorubas have always been people who will vote either way. It doesn't matter, who or not Afenifere is endorsing. But he was quite, I was asking about the fact that your party, your candidate, has never been one to, say vote for me based on the fact that it is my turn. It is the turn of the Southeast. He's always talked about competence, etc., etc. But he said that there is no way that that is not going to come to play in this 2023 elections. How is your party preparing for the pragmatism of something that is most likely to come out to play in the 2023 elections?
Well, let me say clearly that Afenifere has, in no uncertain terms, said that there is no controversy and that they did not endorse the candidacy of Bola Ahmed Tinubu. About 2 years ago, the leadership devolved to Padebajo. And Fasorati said clearly that he was too old and he had handed over leadership. That what he just did was pray for the guests that came to see him in Ondo, that if Peter Obi had come, he would still pray for him. If Kwakwanso, for instance, had visited him, he would pray because he's
I really don't want to visit this controversy
I'm putting it in perspective.
Yes,
but for us,
yes,
in the Labour Party and for the candidacy of Peter Gregory Obi, it's about competency. He's the only candidate who has openly told Nigerians, do not vote for me because I'm Igbo. Vote for me on account of competency and capacity. So those who pander to ethnicity and ethnocentric sentiments are being unfair. And that's why I'm here. I totally disagree.
They're being unfair?
Being unfair because
some people will say that
his Igbo-ness is not the issue.
Just a moment. Some people will say that even the timing of his candidacy has been strategic. In 2019, he was on the ballot, but he was a vice presidential candidate to Vice President Atiku Abubakar, former vice president, who was running as the candidate of the Labour, of the People's Democratic Party. He's still running as that now. but they ran a joint ticket at that time.
That's right.
Wasn't it because at that time the sentiments were also quite high that it was going to be between two northern candidates?
Simply so. But let me tell you, passion, genuine passion, sincerity, and commitment to purpose is beyond ethnocentric sentiments. He came out and said, this is the time to refocus, refix, reshape, redefine our country. And it is for me beyond ethnicity, beyond religion, and beyond the tendencies that divide us. And I said this without fear of querulous critics and with commitment to truth, that the candidacy of Peter Gregory Obi is the only candidacy that resonates beyond religion and region.
Let me come to you now, because I'm sure you must have listened. I don't know why this controversy came up in the first instance, or what Senator Dino Melaye was responding to, but those were his words. And why do members of the PDP feel that their own candidate is not a regional candidate, if they think that other candidates are regional candidates?
For a number of reasons, Malcolm. For one, the advocacy, the candidature of Alhaji Atiku Abubakar is steeped in the sort of policy propositions that provide long-term, lasting solutions to the challenges that have faced this country for almost all of its existence. And at the stage of our national history, of our national life where we are, where we're plagued by record insecurity, record inflation, record unemployment, record lack of access to education, and all those other matrix, what you would realize that more than ever before, the country needs a committed advocate to the solutions that to the problems, committed advocate to the problems, committed advocate to the solutions that form that will resolve the problems that we have always faced. Now, our candidate is the candidate who has, over the course of his career, built a network that is, transnational. It cuts across the entire country. Our candidate is our party is the party that has, over the years, built a network that cuts across the entire country. The candidature, the combination of the candidature and the structure of the party across the country lends the credence to the fact that undoubtedly he's the one who, without appealing to these sorts of regional or religious sentiment, he's the one who focuses simply on what we believe we should be focused on, providing solutions and policy propositions that will resolve the challenges that face this country. Very simply put.
There is no way that we can ignore the fact that our country is still very heavily regional, or will I say ethnocentric, in terms of how its politics is done. It was so heavy in the air that the PDP had to institutionalize it in its own constitution, that there needs to be a rotation, so that no area, no region feels left out. If you look at the pattern of his own emergence as well, would you say that he was able to sufficiently appeal to, will I say, a I'm looking for the right words now.
Pan-Nigerian.
Yeah, a pan-Nigerian sentiment, even within
the
PDP itself.
I'm very grateful for the question, Malcolm. If we must interrogate, and we must interrogate the zoning principle, right, we will discover a couple of things. Between 1999 and now, 3 regions of the country have never produced a president. 3 regions of the country. They are the Northeast, the Southeast, and the North Central. 3 regions have the Southwest, the South-South, and the Northwest, with President Muhammadu Buhari just completing his tenure. I think it appeals to the principle of zoning and the principle of rotation. If one person from any of these 3 regions produces a president, it appeals to that. That is fair, that is just, that is equitable. I've heard the argument be said that the rotation is North versus South and not geopolitical regions. I disagree. I disagree because if we do it North versus South and the objective is an inclusion of as many people as possible. What happens to people, for instance, like me, from the North Central, is that we'll never get included, simply because we don't have the numbers. What will happen to people from the Southeast, for instance, is that they will not get included, simply because the numbers are not there. If we focus only on the regions of North and South, it will never happen that a person from Kogi State, for instance, will stand the chance of being president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. For that reason, we have to, for that reason...
I'll let you, finish your thoughts, but I have to interrupt you because the constitution of your party did not talk about geopolitical zones.
That's right. The constitution of our party spoke about
North and South.
No, the constitution of our party spoke about rotation. There's no specific mention about how that rotation should be done.
Does it recognize geopolitical zones?
Well, we've always recognized geopolitical zones since 1999. Always. Historically. That is the reason why you see the president will be from one geopolitical zone, the vice president from another geopolitical zone, the senate president from yet another geopolitical zone, the speaker of the house from yet another geopolitical zone, the secretary general...
But in this instance...
If you take all that into consideration, our party has historically always spoken about geopolitical zones and implemented that in its zoning principles.
So perhaps there could be a micro-zoning, after the general or the broad acceptance, about, north versus south, or north and south, as the case might be. When you now say, okay, it's going to the south, what part of the south? It's going to the north, what part of the north? These are the kind of questions that people will expect that you'll ask. But where it is convenient, because we all know that the country is not equally structured. The Southeast, for instance, has 5 states. The Northwest has 7 states. And Kano alone has over 40 local government areas.
44.
When you have a Bayelsa that has 8 local government areas. So when you look at the fact that, we're not structured in an even manner, and if democracy is about numbers, some states will certainly have a bigger say than some other states will.
Which is the reason why you have to use a zoning formula that is as granular as possible. Having taken into recognition all the numbers that you've just called, having taken into recognition everything that you've just said,
yes.
If you use the broad terms of North versus South, a person from Kano or a person from Katsina or a person from Kebbi will always have an advantage over a person from, say, Kogi, Plateau, or Benue. Isn't that what played out in the primaries of the PDP?
How? Alhaji Atiku Abubakar is from the northeast. One, if we use your broad definition of north versus south, wouldn't have had a shot. One, two.
Why wouldn't he have had a shot?
Because if we use that, they're stronger, the more delegates from Kano State, for instance.
Yes.
The more delegates,
and we saw what happened
and we took it into consideration.
We saw what happened towards the end of that campaign, of the primaries, where a Northwestern candidate stood down for him and told people who would have ordinarily voted him to vote for Alhaji Atiku Abubakar.
Which is going to bring me
Can we discountenance the effect of that?
At some point, we have to take into consideration that there was politicking that went on. Agreements were reached this way, that way, the other way. And you cannot avoid the fact that that will happen in political circles.
I think the question
I'm trying to finish my
it's not about. Yes, I keep interrupting you because I'm actually trying to. It's not about what I'm trying to bring out. It's not about the PDP primaries. What I'm trying to say, or the question I'm trying to pose is, if you were to look at his emergence, can we really say that when you're now talking about regional candidates, or in terms of even how he himself emerged, can we discountenance how that is going to play out, within the larger electoral cycle, in such a way that we can begin to preempt maybe what could most likely happen? Because people do fear that there could be deep divisions after the 2023 elections, and that whoever takes the cake is going to have a job of work uniting all Nigerians behind that one party.
It is the first task that anybody who wins the presidential elections in 2023 will have to embark on. It is the first task, which is the reason why our candidate is the only candidate who's committed to forming a government of national unity that takes into consideration regional interests, that takes into consideration cross-party interests. And not only that, goes as far as saying that we're in a similar place in 2022 going into 2023 as we were in 1999, which formed the foundation of the policy of appointing people into the government of President Olusegun Obasanjo who were not necessarily from the PDP stock and ensuring that there was a broad spread of appointments and inclusion into the government. It is the reason why our candidate, as recently as yesterday, on his behalf, the Vice President restated that commitment. As recently as he's restated that commitment by himself, as recently as last week. Our candidate is the only person who is saying we recognize the tensions that the current political season are putting up, and this is our plan for how to reunite the country immediately thereafter.
That candidate is the first candidate in this political season who has pandered to regional sentiments. That candidate is the only candidate who basically had told Northerners that he is the one who should and who would represent Northern interest. That candidate is indeed the person whose mantra is about unifier, but he's a divider in chief.
Yeah, but just a moment, are you really taking, I mean, because I think I know the statement you're referring to. He's here, he's talking for the PDP. But some people will say that, you know, are you also taking into cognizance the context in which he was speaking?
Very well,
and the question to
very
which
well,
he was
Let me say
responding.
this. I am a student of semantics, and I proudly say so. When you look at the context, yes, I agreed that he was in the Northern Fora. But when you're talking about a pan-Nigerian candidate, you should be talking about a nation in need, in dire need of capacity over ethnocentric sentiments, of competency over ethnocentric sentiments. And let me say clearly that the only candidate who has, in every thought and respect, canvassed a pan-Nigerian ideal is Peter Gregory. And oftentimes when I look at what people say, you know, the question is, why always Obi? And I'll tell you, when this flooding thing started, people wondered why he started his visits from the North Central and before he went to the South and the Southeast. And the same people who accuse him of being a regional candidate said, oh, why would you go to the North first? Why would you go to the South? Why not Anambra State? He went to Anambra after he had visited the North and the South and the South. Because simply, the challenge of our nation is beyond the propriety of ethnocentric sentiments. It's about empathy, passion, commitment, and love for a nation that desires a leader who cares, who has deep commitment to a progressive nation. And the only candidate in the amphitheater is Peter Gregory. And I say this, you know the candidate of the APC, you know the Milocon phraseology, you know Atiku and how the North will need a Northern candidate who's pan-Nigerian. So I put it, because I'll boldly undertake that issue. And then you see other candidates who are talking about their ethnocentric and regional biases. But the only person who has come on our political kaleidoscope and said something very clear, he said, do not vote for me because I'm Igbo. Vote for me because of my competency and my capacity. Vote for me because of my passion and my understanding of the urgency of now.
Yeah, but can you really discountenance when he says do not vote for me? Because part of the reason why his candidacy has, you know, for some people, apart from resonates, is also on the issue of justice and fairness, which is what a number of people...
That's the lowest on the ladder.
You think so?
Yes, I tell you. Let me tell you this. Nigerians are looking for a frugal leader who will put due process, financial discipline, over and above profligacy. Well, Nigerians are looking at competency and capacity over ethnocentric sentiments.
You say that it is the lowest on the ladder.
Yes, that's it.
That's how
for him.
That's how
and for us.
That's how you're looking at it. I mean, that is on the lowest on the ladder for you.
For our party.
Yes.
For our candidate.
But it is there.
Oh yes, it is. That's why Atiku will say what he said in the North. We are not denying the fact that we have ethnocentric tendencies. We're not denying the fact that we have regional prejudices and biases. We're not denying the fact that some people are throwing up those issues. If you go to the Southwest and you see the BAT campaign, they're talking about Yoruba-ness. If you go to the North and see the Atiku Abubakar campaign, they're talking about their Hausa-ness and their Fulani-ness. The only candidate who's talking about our Nigerian-ness is Peter Gregory Obi, and that's because hunger is indiscriminate of your ethnicity. Insecurity is indiscriminate of your religion. Joblessness is indiscriminate of where you are from. We're looking at a country that works. We're looking at a country that's able to appropriate the amazing resources and riches ineffable that God Almighty has blessed our country with for progress. And the only candidate who looks at the Nigerian sociopolitical environment from that prism is Peter Gregory Obi. And that's the way to go. I think that the time has come for us to nudge the Nigerian electorate to look at the candidate who sees beyond your ethnicity, who sees beyond your religion, who sees all of us as one people, because we're cut together in a single network of mutuality. What affects one directly affects the other indirectly. The hunger and the space does not know whether you're Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa, or the minorities. The joblessness in the space does not care about your ethnicity. The insecurity that tears us apart does not care whether you're Igbo, Yoruba, Hausa, or the minorities. And the only candidate who thinks about competency and capacity going forward into 2023 is Peter Gregory Obi.
Let me flip this conversation to Lagos now. I know my colleagues have questions for you.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. But it's quite an interesting conversation, especially when you weigh, the messaging. On the one hand, I mean, you cannot remove entirely that ethnic consideration. In fact, both candidates represented here have a clamor, at least there's been some sort of clamor. Mr. Noja has spoken to that, saying, well, the Northeast has not had some sort of representation at that very top level. We've heard a lot of groups also supporting Mr. Obi based on the fact that they believe that for equity, fairness, and justice, it should go to the Southeast. But then when it comes to issues of competence and the voting proper, they will say that, well, we're pan-Nigerians. I don't know if that's an irony in itself or they go hand in hand. But there's something I'd like both of you to speak to, which is something that was mentioned. And I think it's important that we clear that out. And I'll start with Mr. Wokobia. And this is based off that point on a government on national unity, a government of national unity that was mentioned earlier. What does that mean for your candidate, this government of national unity, operationalizing it? Does it mean that if he becomes president, he will select candidates from other parties, or members of other parties, maybe frontline candidates, to be a part of the government, or people from those regions or zones to be part of the government? What exactly does this government of national unity mean for your candidates?
With a greater sense of commitment and seriousness, every candidate who truly cares about our country will be thinking and talking about the need for a government of national unity. It's not restricted to any candidate, because we have never been this divided. Our country is divided along its fault lines, religion and region. And so whoever emerges president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria come 2023, God willing, when Peter Gregory Obi emerges the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, he will address these issues. And so the issues for the constitution of a government of national unity becomes imperative. But let me say here, I listened to you, my brother, and you did talk about issues pertaining equity, which so many people have talked about, and justice. My brother talked about the fact that 3 regions, as it were, since 1993, since 1999 has not produced a president: the South East, the North Central, and indeed the Northeast. But if you now take it further, you find out that the Northeast has produced a vice president. The Southeast has not produced a vice president. The Southeast has not produced a president. So if you're looking at the Nigerian evolution and the need for brotherhood, the need for equity, the need for fairness, like Mokwe and yours sincerely had talked about, what is primarily important is to look the way of the Southeast. But that is not the linchpin
Mr.
of the
Wokobia,
Peter
to be
Gregory Obi
fair
campaign.
and to be
The
clear,
linchpin.
really, we can never really finish with that conversation of equity, fairness, and justice. I know it's one that will maybe last up until even after the election, but this one is particularly about the government of national unity, which I imagine your candidate is planning that. So I want to know what it means. What it means exactly. I'd like you to define if you can. Does it mean that he will bring in people from other parties, or just essentially have people from other regions?
Nigerians who care, it means including Nigerians who care, indiscriminate of political parties, indiscriminate of ethnicity, indiscriminate of religion, Nigerians who truly believe that we can collectively make our country better. President Obasanjo did that in the beginning of the Fourth Republic. You remember Bola Ige was not of the PDP stock, but he brought him into government. And several other persons were co-opted at different levels of government. To move our country forward, we definitely must look at issues from that prism. And after the town hall meeting yesterday, at different levels within the Labour Party and with our principal, it was clearly obvious that a Kola Abiola, for instance, will be necessarily important in moving our country forward. He sounded very articulate, and he brought issues that are germane to moving our country forward to the fore.
Let me take this.
We saw the delivery and the erudition of Kwakwanso. There's several people that will bring into government when Peter Gregory will be indiscriminate of political parties, indiscriminate of region, indiscriminate of the biases and the fault lines that hold our country down. We will have a government.
Well, Mr. Wokobia, I believe you meant to say
all-inclusive,
not
and
when.
involving of Nigerians of different tendencies.
I believe you meant to say if he becomes president, not when, because the people essentially will go out there to make the decision.
When he becomes president.
Well, it has to be if, except you already have the results of the election.
President, he will win the election.
Well, you don't have the results yet, and it's essentially an INEC purview and the people. But I understand, I mean, the conversation, it's the political season. But let's go to Mr. Onoja and get a sense, because I know you started the conversation about government of national unity. He has talked about people that he'll possibly poach. He has mentioned some of them. What does this mean for your candidates, really, this government of national unity? Because I believe that we need to have a nation really to govern, and we've seen lots of fault lines being explored or exploited in recent times.
I will respond to that by saying that only our candidate has spoken about it. We're not going to assume it on the part of other candidates, because they've, as much as, and I hear Mr. Nwokobia say that it is so important and that everybody who cares about Nigeria should be speaking about it. Well, only one person is speaking about it, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar. What does it mean? It means that as much as possible, he will bring into governance not just people from the People's Democratic Party, not just people from his side of the country, not just people of his faith and his religion. He will bring as much representation into government as possible to ensure that everybody across the country gets, or as many demographics across the country get to play key roles, primarily in reuniting the country first and foremost, and then in ensuring that we are governed properly and adequately. If we're going to say that, and these are Mr. Nwakobia's words, only people who love Nigeria will be speaking about it, then there's one person who has been speaking about it. We therefore have to take it into consideration that amongst the candidates, he's the one who is demonstrating the most love for the country, because he's literally the only one who's speaking about it. He's literally the only one who's speaking about it. And if it's not just speaking about it, it's also in our party manifesto, because there is a strong commitment, just as it was demonstrated by our party in 1999. There's a strong commitment to realizing that we've never been this divided, to realizing that we've never been this poor, to realizing that we've never been this unhappy as the Nigerian people, and that it is only a broad spectrum of the Nigerian people, regardless of party, regardless of tribe, regardless of religion, who are going to be able to work together to ensure that we can recover our country from the morals that the APC has led us into willy-nilly, and ensure that we're firmly placed on a path to socio-political and economic growth and development. It goes without saying.
I'm just wondering, let me ask you if you think that the PDP is jittery. In the light of the conversation that held, where one of the spokespersons of your party said that the candidate of the Labour Party is splitting the votes of the PDP, and saying that, look, any vote for the other, candidate is splitting the vote and favoring the other, another party completely, irrespective of whatever their leanings are. Is the PDP jittery?
Jittery is not the word I would use. It's not the word I will use. The PDP is aware and is taking into consideration. If you look at electoral maps, you will see that, and if you study social trends, you will see that there are a number of people who primarily used to vote for the PDP who say they will vote another way in this election. Jittery is not the word I will use. Consider it. PDP considers that fact and considers the potential outcome. However, we're also aware that given the positioning of our candidate as the one who's focused primarily on solutions to resolving Nigeria's socioeconomic problems and who is focused primarily, again, to bringing people from across the country together to form a government if he wins the election. And I say if because unless and until the Nigerian people exercise their constitutional right to elect a government, nobody can assume for them or seek to force.
Well, Mr. Onoja, you're not particularly answering the question. My apologies. You're not particularly, speaking to the issue. Well, you said the question.
We're not jittery about it.
Okay, so you said you will not use the word jittery. So
it's
what
not
word?
Jittery, it's considered.
Okay. And consequently, but you also admitted that some people who belong to the voting bloc that always favored the PDP hitherto seem to have gone to the Labour Party. That's what you just said now.
Yeah, well, I can also say to this, I can also speak to this and say that there were people who would have voted for APC who have made up their minds to vote for our presidential
Well, incidentally,
candidate.
the APC is not on this panel to speak to that for or against. But let me ask Mr. Okubia the same question.
Let me rephrase that. Okay. Let me rephrase that. There are people who would have voted for other candidates who are making the choice to vote for our candidates. There has to be the exercise, and we recognize that as the People's Democratic Party.
Well, you have only just confirmed, Mr. Onoja, just 1 second. You've only just confirmed willy-nilly the conversation that we had with a representative of the Labour Party last week who said about 85% of PDP's voting bloc is moving to the Labour Party. That's why I asked if the concern, or rather, maybe I should put it this way, how serious is that concern for the PDP? That's for you, Mr. Onoja.
This is an election where, this will be an election where every vote counts. The loss of one vote from anywhere is any political party that does not consider seriously the loss of any vote in an election where every vote counts. It's not, to my mind, serious about winning an election. And so, again, I will restate, we're considerate about it. We're not jittery about it because you want as many people to vote for you as possible. And it's really just, it's not about whether we're fighting vote splitting. We're going across the country, we're speaking to people of every possible demographic. And we're knowing that, okay, so there are a couple of candidates who have left with Mr. Peter. I mean, a couple of voters who probably have left with Mr. Peter Obi. It doesn't change the fact that they have also been there. Also, millions of voters who have made up their mind to vote for PDP, either newly because they're just coming of age and they realize that in this first election, this is the person who is speaking the most about solutions, or people who are returnee voters who didn't vote for PDP in 2019 or in 2015 and who have made up their minds to vote for PDP now. And anybody who says that there is not a loss and gain, it's not doing a proper assessment of the Nigerian socio-political space.
Okay. Well, Mr. Okubia, let me ask you the same question perhaps a little differently. That same spokesperson of the PDP also said that, your candidate cannot make it. For instance, he said the Labour Party only fielded 30 out of 109 candidates for the Senate. Who is going to protect the votes of the Labour Party when even fielding candidates for 109 senatorial seats, they couldn't? And that any vote for your candidate is a vote for another party altogether. How do you respond?
And let me say, oftentimes when you look at what's happening on our political demography and political kaleidoscope, you understand the fact that those who are talking about structures and those who are talking about, they've lost steam, because what we have is a sweltering harmattan of popular discontent with the Leviathan, the APC, and the Behemoth, the PDP. Nigerians are increasingly identifying with the new urgency, the call for a new day, and the call for a new tendency in leadership. And so it is about Labour Party, and the movement is about a new deal. It's about a movement that is interested in taking back our country for good. And that is why the candidate that resonates the most, you've had about 6-7 polls regarding the 2023 election, and 5 out of 6 of the polls have given it to Peter Gregory. Only one gave it to Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and with a caveat that the Nigerian people may disapprove of his victory should he win. The reason I use the word when Peter Gregory wins is because he's the only candidate that resonates across the 6 geopolitical zones of the country. And then interestingly, the new raging demography of voters, you've heard the INEC statistics, puts the number of people, new registrants, at 40% young people. And you know, you and I know, and this is about truth and unequivocal reality.
Answering the question that
more
I
than
asked
80%
you.
of
Just
that
a second, just a second.
vote Peter Gregory.
You are not particularly speaking to the issue. Just one second, Mr. Awokobe, if you can hear me. If you can hear me, just one second. You're not particularly speaking to the issue that I've asked you. And the question is pretty simple. Is the plan of the Labour Party to deplete the votes of the PDP as alleged by the PDP? Is it true that, you know, Labour Party is just playing a game because really the Labour Party cannot make it, fielding only 30 out of 109 candidates, according to that same candidate, the spokesperson of the other candidates? So that's the question that I'm asking you. Kindly speak to it directly.
Let me say, and that's the question, the answer I was trying to, I was driving the vehicle to that point. For the PDP alleging that the Labour Party wants to split its vote, that's absolutely untrue, because, like I said, there's a raging fervency, there's an urgency, there's a sweltering harmattan calling for a new day. Nigerians are saying that they want a new tendency away from the Leviathan, the APC, and the Behemoth, the PDP. They call for a new Republican leadership, for a new day and a new deal. It's about the Labour Party and Peter Gregory. So it is not necessarily about how many candidates have been fielded at different levels by Labour Party. It's about the urgency and the fervency of now. And that's actually why I was driving the vehicle. In Malawi, the issues were the same. In Kenya, the issues were the same. In Lesotho, the issues were the same. In Zambia, people called those who sought to etch a new deal on their collective political kaleidoscope, social media leaders, social media presidents. But you know what? Like it happened in the 1950s and 1960s, within that period, about 24 countries across the world, Asia, South America, and Africa, got independence because there was a fervency, a universal fervency calling for independence. As you and I talk, nations are rising up to take back their destinies and make their countries responsible and responsive to the people. And that's what's happening. It's happened in Lesotho, it happened in Zambia, it's happened in Kenya, and it will happen here because the masses of our people have risen to the urgency of now. And they're saying that the time to take back our country is now. Okay, and the man at the fore of that movement is Peter Gregory Obi.
If I may, very briefly, to speak to the question and to speak to the point, you cannot discountenance the number of candidates that are presented across across the country. You
So
cannot
I was
discount
just
any
going
of
to
that.
ask you, I mean, I have two
I'd like to make
questions.
that point. I'd like
Yes,
to make
just
that
a
point.
moment,
Yeah.
and it will be around that particular
I will.
issue.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be asking both of you, even though it's going to be, you know, it's going to be, will I say, written differently or said differently. Your party is still, you know, trying to pull itself together. We understand that 5 of the governors who are still, you know, in protest against let's say against the emergence of your party's, or asking that there be fairness within your party and asking the national chairman to step down so that there will be equity, are going ahead to run the campaigns for, you know, for their members who are going to be running for different positions, even within the party still. How do you think that these divisions is going to affect the chances of your candidate come 2023?
I would respond to that by saying 2 things. One, there is a desire within every member of the People's Democratic Party to see that situation resolved as quickly as possible. It's taken far too long. And to the minds of many of us, it has been a distraction. There's that desire. However, there's also the desire to continually communicate with Nigerian people, and the realization that we can do A and B at the same time. There is a recognition of their disagreement. There's a recognition of that. And PDP historically has always been a party where this sort of disagreement have always been permitted. We're not one party where one person sits down and controls everybody.
You say it's gone on for far too long. So do you think now that, you know, it's beyond resolution?
I don't believe that. That door is permanently open. That door is permanently open. And it doesn't change the fact that the party still appeals to a lot of people, to millions of Nigerians across the country. Doesn't change the fact that the party is still campaigning to millions of people across the country. And doesn't change the fact that the party is still speaking to the sorts of policies that will be solutions to Nigeria's problems. You can do that while you constantly leave a door open for reconciliation and negotiation. The good thing about it is that on every side, even on the sides of the 5 governors, they still maintain to you that that door is open. They still maintain to you that there is a commitment to the People's Democratic Party. And that goes without saying. I think sometimes we really actually just need to focus, and this is where the media needs to help us. While we're doing all that, and when I say us, I don't mean the political party, I mean Nigerians. While we're doing all that, while all that conversation between the political classes going on, the Nigerian people have to focus on their own conversation. Who is going to help us create jobs? Who is going to help us resolve our insecurity? Who is going to give us better access to education? Who is going to give us better access to healthcare? Who is going to resolve particularly youth unemployment?
I think you must remember,
we can do these
you must
two
remember
things at the
that
same
the people who we're talking about here are leaders in their own capacity.
And I recognize that.
They lead states as we currently speak, and they certainly have a following. And the followings that they have, they're not Nigerians, they're Nigerians.
And I will say this, it is in recognition of the fact that every Nigerian has that constitutional right to one vote, that you can be talking to the leader and to the follower at the same time.
Fair enough. So let me come to you. Your party, I mean, one of the things I also took away from the conversation I had with the Director General of the campaign is that you haven't shut the door of negotiations with even parties like the NNPP, which it seemed like there was going to be no negotiations, or negotiations had totally failed initially. But it looks like you're beginning to realize that you would need the collaboration of many other candidates on this particular journey. How is that coming along? And how are you, making yourself marketable towards them in such a way that you can accommodate them if nobody's really willing to step down for the other?
Consistently, there's a candidate who has referred to every candidate in the campaign as his brother. There's a candidate who has reached out to everyone as someone, he has talked about Atiku as someone he respects, about Bola Tinubu as his elder brother. He's talked about Kwakwanso as a friend and his brother. There is this commitment to national rebate that P2B has. It's a bit of a wonderment to some of us. He believes that we must all work together to bet a new day. He believes that we must all work together to redeem and take back our country. And when you're dealing with the behemoth, permit my choice of word again, the PDP that was in power for 16 years, and you're dealing with the Leviathan that's been in power for about 7 years, going to 8, you need to work with other tendencies to take them out of power. And there is a raging fervency that's put Peter Obi ahead. So what are we doing? We're looking at how we co-opt our brothers like Shore, our brothers like Kwakwanso, our brothers like Kola Abiol, and the likes into a rainbow coalition that will take back our country for good. And it is imperative that we do so. Because
is that resonating amongst your followers?
It does. And that's exactly what I'm saying, that there is the obedient movement and indeed the Labour Party and our principal are looking at this rainbow coalition because whether we like it or not, after 23 years of failure, after 23 years of no light, after 23 years of joblessness, after 23 years of ASU strike, and I'm talking about a situation that existed between the PDP and the APC, that's the Siamese twins, you need a new tendency in leadership. And that's what Labour Party, Peter Gregory Obi, the Obedient Movement, and the other parties that are saying that it is time for a new day are pushing. So we're talking with every tendency because we believe that come February 2023, we must take back our country for good. We must redefine the values and leadership, and we must make leaders who are responsible and responsive to the people to emerge on our political amphitheater.
So if I hear you clearly, just a moment, you'll have your say. If I hear you clearly, you're partnering with everybody else apart from those within the PDP and APC.
Largely apart from those who have brought this country to the sorry past, apart from those who have brought our country to the nada, apart from those who stole our collective wealth.
Just a moment, how possible is that knowing that your candidate also left the PDP? And perhaps you'll still have
How long was he in the PDP? He went into the PDP because he thought... No, but how long was he there? He went into the PDP because he thought that it was time to take inclusive of everybody who thinks about the new day to the mainstream of Nigerian politics. Okay. And when he found out that corruption was at the core of the values in leadership in the PDP, when he found out that vote buying was about the normative for the PDP primaries, he stepped out.
Okay.
The issues are simply...
You had your say.
We have to reject these sorts of rhetorics that have no steeping in reality. We have to reject them. And I will tell you, Peter Obi not only was the vice presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party in 2019, during which time he said fantastically glowing things about our presidential candidate, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar. He served in the government of former President Goodluck Jonathan as a special advisor on economic affairs and leader of an economic team. If you're going to sit down here and say to us, oh, PDP and all its time and its failures, what you have to admit is that Peter is one of two things. It's either you're not telling us the truth now, or you're admitting to us as Nigerians that Peter Obi contributed to those failures. No, hold on, can I finish? I kept quiet and I waited for you to finish. I waited for you to finish. I waited for you to finish. You cannot say to us that you were an economic advisor for a party that during its 16 years in government averaged 7% GDP growth every year. You cannot say for 16 years, average 7% GDP growth. Hold on, 5 years.
Less than 5 years. And it moved on for a new tendency and passion and leadership.
I will even tell you how far that statistic went. That President Muhammadu Buhari, on February 1st, 2014, speaking at the Chatham House, quoted the particular statistic that on the average, PDP grew the economy 7% a year between 1999 and 2015. He went ahead to call it paper growth. Let me finish, please.
Just a moment. I mean, while averages are allowed, and you know, it is okay for us to quote averages, it might be misleading. Because if you look at the fact that in 2002, you had the biggest growth ever seen, 15.3%. Yeah.
I'd like to speak to that.
Yeah, just a moment. 15.3%. If you were to, you know, put that in terms of average, that suddenly will help all the other years and might mask what the real growth rate was. And even at that, remember that for many years, part of the conversation was whether or not there was, growth that came with employment, etc. What exactly was responsible for that growth?
I would like to.
But just quickly,
point.
I just to quickly put that on.
I would like to finish the point then,
yes.
having taken that into consideration,
yes.
and I'd like to speak to that. In 1999, growth, you can quickly fact check me. 1999 growth year on year was 0.6%. The next year, if I'm not mistaken, it was 5.6% or thereabout.
Yeah.
In 2022. It was 15%.
2002.
In 2002, sorry.
Yeah.
It was 15%.
Yeah.
The chairman, the vice president, and the chairman of the National Economic Forum at the time, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, the same sort of place where we are, with the same sort of promise for the same sort of delivery. This is you pulling up these numbers now, this is testament to the ability that he has to deliver on a previously unseen
I like
scale.
the fact that you emphasize the 15.3%. But
I will go ahead.
After
the
that,
following year,
you now had 7%. Yes, which was at least half.
But it was 7%.
Yes, a major drop.
If you consider that you haven't had 7% growth between 2015.
There are many factors responsible.
And these factors are all taking. These factors that are present now were present between 1999 and 2003.
Gentlemen,
they were present then.
I wish we could go on and on. Politics is always an interesting discussion.
But let me still in this.
No, we're totally out of time, gentlemen.
I
have to wrap this up now. I'm so sorry. We're totally out of time, and I thank both of you for being, gentlemanly.
How the PDP failed
for being very gentlemanly in terms of how you have conducted your conversation. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Early this morning. Ilemona Onoja is a member of the People's Democratic Party. You've heard how passionately he's spoken for the candidate of the party, and also Mr. Chris Wankobia Jr., member Obi Dati Presidential Campaign Council. You've also heard him speaking passionately, almost ending every statement with Peter Gregory Obi. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you very much.
The pleasure's mine.
Well, we'll take a break at this point, and we'll be back with another part, another aspect of politics. Maybe this time around the economy. Why don't you stay tuned? Please stay with us.